Examination session, May 2015, Bedford Road Collegiate 6125, number 0001, internal oral commentary. In the narrative poem Bitter Strawberries, Sylvia Plath appears to be communicating the universal theme of war in a negative light. Although the poem appears to be about Cold War conflict, the main message from this poem, being war in a negative light, is still universally applicable today. Plath accomplishes the conveyance of this message by using narrative elements such as setting and plot, combined with conventional poetic literary devices to overall have the effect of communicating the theme of war in a negative light. In the first stanza, like I mentioned, since this is a narrative poem, it has narrative elements such as characters and setting. So in the first line, it establishes the setting as a morning in the strawberry field. Now initially it sets a very positive and happy and warm and welcoming mood, but as we go further down stanza 1, it sort of strays away from this mood. It introduces the concept of Russians. They talked about the Russians squatted down between the rows who listened. Now this doesn't necessarily have to refer to the Cold War era, because as I mentioned, it's still applicable today. But just the fact that it's sort of just not talking about the setting anymore, it sort of strays away from that mood. It brings it just down a couple levels. Then this is further complemented by the fifth line of stanza 1. We heard the headwoman say, and this is interesting because now, as I mentioned, this is the first character that's been introduced, the headwoman. At this point, we don't know what the purpose this headwoman serves, but the fact that there's a dramatic pause there in the form of a comma, it really makes us wonder. And then we go on to the sixth line, the final line of stanza 1, bomb them off the map. Now this final line really serves to establish this headwoman as the antagonist of this poem, and it really serves to break that mood of the initial happy and sort of positive and warm mood and sort of bring it to a more desolate and a very unhappy sort of feeling. And if we just look at the structure of the poem overall, just by visually observing the poem, we can see that the stanzas are not balanced in terms of their line numbers. Now the structure that this serves is that it makes the poem very aesthetically unpleasing, meaning that just by looking at the poem, us as the reader feels very uncomfortable, and the best way to convey the theme of anything in a negative light is to make the person who's reading it feel uncomfortable. And that's exactly what Plath accomplishes by using the structure. Then in the second stanza, it goes, horseflies buzzed, paused, and stung, and the taste of strawberries turned thick and sour. And this complements that broken mood that was set by this antagonistic headwoman. Just the fact that she mentions buzzed, paused, and stung. It's using that onomatopoeia and negative imagery to really build on to the fact that it's not a happy sort of setting anymore. The theme of war has sort of corrupted that happiness, and now we're in this very different environment of strawberries turning thick and sour. It's almost as if we link the symbol of a strawberry is obviously a recurring symbol at this point. Appears in the title, appears in stanza 1, not in stanza 2. So the fact that this taste of the strawberry has turned thick and sour, it's referring to the fact that the peace that nature brings has just it's corroding away just because this headwoman has made these references to the war. It's almost as if this is the reaction to the narrator's opinion on what this headwoman just said. So it's like this antagonistic headwoman at this point. She's controlling the mood of this poem, and the overall effect that this has, it makes us feel very uncomfortable, which again goes to show the theme of war in a negative light. Then in stanza 3, another character is introduced, Mary. Again, this is playing on with the fact that this is a narrative poem, so it has elements like characters and setting. So Mary's introduced, and Mary said slowly, I've got a fella, new line, old enough to go, new line, if anything should happen. Now, it's interesting, the way that Mary exposes her opinion on this headwoman's, the references that the headwoman is making, this antagonistic headwoman, the references that she's making to war, the way that Mary sort of makes her, appearance into this poem, she's very hesitant. It's like almost as if she's uncomfortable. She's uncomfortable by the fact that she has to send this fella, whoever it may be, it could be her husband, it could be her son, etc. She has to send this person to war if he's old enough to go. Obviously, this is an allusion to conscription. Again, a reference to war. And just the fact that she's uncomfortable is portraying the theme of war in a negative light. Then in stanza 4, we experience a mood shift. It goes from very negative and dark imagery, it goes to positive imagery. It goes, the sky was high and blue, 2 children laughed at tag in the tall grass. The new mood is, again, it's set as positivity, warmth, and happiness. It's almost as if the narrator now has shifted their view from this antagonistic headwoman in front of them, and they just sort of look to the side, and now they're observing all this beauty that nature brings with it. And by doing this, by alternating the mood back and forth from positivity to negativity, Plath is accomplishing the effect of conveying the theme of war in a negative light, because it's almost as if she's trying to show us, would you rather have this imagery on one hand of strawberries turning thick and sour, or would you rather have this imagery on the other hand of the sky being high and blue, 2 children laughing at tag, etc. So overall, by alternating the mood by using imagery, Plath is accomplishing the conveyance of the theme of war in a negative light, because she's alternating between positivity and negativity, and she's literally showing us that war is bad by comparing it to something that's good. Then the fifth stanza, again, this antagonistic headwoman makes her appearance into the poem again. She makes that reference to war again, that allusion to war. The draft has passed. It's making that allusion to war, And again, she makes her, this is why she's the antagonist, because she's the one who's constantly shifting the mood into that negative sort of direction. And then the first two lines of the fifth stanza are this head woman, and then another character is introduced in stanza 5. Don't, pleaded the little girl with blonde braids. So it's like, in the first two lines of stanza 5, it's like this antagonistic evil, her evil nature is being compared to the innocence of childhood. It's almost as if evil and good are being juxtaposed in stanza 5 to, again, portray the theme of war in a negative light, because it's, again, Plath is showing us this is good, this is evil. Obviously, war is evil, because the idea of this antagonistic head woman has just very tightly been linked to that concept of war at this point in the poem. Then, as we go on to stanza 6, it goes, her blue eyes swam with vague terror. This is interesting because now the mood has just, it's now static. The mood has just been set. The mood is not changing anymore. And it's just, now Plath is just sort of deepening our understanding of this, this negative mood that this head woman has just set. So it's maintained. The use of diction with the word terror, again, it's showing the effect of war, portraying it in a negative light, because now this innocent little girl, she's terrified of what this antagonistic head woman is saying. Then it goes, she added pettishly, I can't see why you're always talking this way. So now Plath is using dialogue as a literary device here. She's using dialogue to alienate this head woman. She's saying, I can't see why you're always talking this way, this little girl. That's what she's saying to this antagonistic head woman. So it's almost as if now Plath is trying to alienate the concept of war, showing how now, war is a negative thing. It's having this effect on, little children. It's having this effect on innocence and peace. And she's overall having the effect of isolating, the theme of war, sort of, criticizing it in a sense, and making it appear negative compared to positive things. Then when we continue down stanza 6, it goes, she stood up, a thin commanding figure. Again, the antagonistic quality of this, of this head woman. She's obviously now, she's upset. She doesn't, she's, angry that her, opinion on war is being criticized. So this antagonistic quality of this thin commanding figure in faded dungarees, businesslike, she asks us, how many quarts? Now, the word businesslike, here's a key word, because this really shows that apathetic nature of this antagonistic head woman, right? Her apathy towards the theme of war is a very antagonistic quality, because war, she's pretty much, praising the idea of war profiteering, economic growth, etc. She's not even worried that the theme of war has this negative effect on this little girl. So just the fact that, again, the protagonist and the antagonist have this sort of tension going on is really conveying the theme of war in a negative light. Then the last stanza, it goes, kneeling over the rose, we reached among the leaves with quick practiced hands. So it's like, now the narrator, she's, whoever the narrator may be, now the narrator is sort of, scrambling, trying to search for that peace again within nature, that, turning their head down, looking at the strawberries in front of them, that themes, the berries, it makes its appearance here again. It goes, with quick practiced hand, cupping the berry protectively before. Now this line is very interesting. Cupping the berry protectively before. She doesn't exactly just straight up say why she's cupping the berry protectively. That could leave open her interpretation. But the fact that she puts snapping off the stem between thumb and forefinger in a new line, it's almost as if Plath is pretty much putting peace and nature within our grasp, like cupping the berry protectively before, and then two new lines snapping it off the stem. So it's like she puts positivity within our reach, but then quickly takes it right away, just to amplify that effect of war being negative and showing how you could have this peace, but obviously now you can't, because we're destroying nature. These are the effects of war. And so to conclude, the tone of this poem was pretty much narrative throughout, as I mentioned. Since this is a narrative poem, it's pretty much a narrator describing the events that are happening on this field. So it's pretty much like Plath is trying to show us this bad story. This is what could happen if we let things like war escalate. So overall, in conclusion, Plath in this poem accomplishes the conveyance of the theme of war in a negative light by using narrative elements such as setting and character, combined with poetic conventional literary devices.
Thanks, Kazim. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about whether or not you think the title is appropriate for this poem.
I think the title is really appropriate because just the fact that I mentioned that the symbol of the strawberry being linked to nature, just the fact that even in the title, right, the symbol of the strawberry is really of being linked to nature. It's sort of being corroded just in the title, bitter strawberries, bitter nature. It's like almost nature is bitter at the site of war.
Mm-hmm. What about the color imagery as well? Does that?
Prominently? The color imagery, I think colors, it's the best way to convey positivity, right? Just the colors, the sky was high in blue, right? Blue, it's a very positive color compared to things such as, strawberries being thick and sour, right? Mm-hmm. Although that's not using color, but just leaves open our interpretation that, strawberries being thick and sour, you could obviously, imagine a rotting strawberry compared to this beautiful imagery of the sky being high in blue. It even mentions that the little, child, her blue eyes come with vague terror. Mm-hmm. I think the color plays a big role in sort of bringing out the negativity in war and showing it and isolating it.
Okay, thank you. Is this a typical Plath poem?
I think this is very atypical of Plath because this is not like very usual of her because first of all it's a narrative poem, right? Most of our other poetry uses a lot of imagery and sort of like metaphors and things of that nature. This is not a poem in the conventional sense, which I think is very interesting because it adds to the effect of this poem, right? War is obviously not a very common topic, and you can't just use common ideas to convey such a a different topic. You have to use something that's suited to this topic. So I think that's why Plath chose to write this poem this way.
Thanks, Kazim. So we're going to shift our conversation to running in the family for the second part of our examination here. My first question is about the cultural aspects. What cultural aspects of the context had the biggest impact on the writer's story?
I think because Ondaatje, right from the start, we knew that he was visiting from a foreign land, being the West, being Canada. He was coming into a very foreign land for him. He was coming into Ceylon, right? And just the fact that he was coming into this sort of foreign area really added to the fact that we could trust his perspective, because just he was interested in the culture, right? He made that very evident. He's like, I like the weather here, I like the people here, it's very interesting. So just the fact that he was intrigued by the culture and the context in Ceylon, it really makes us trust his sort of point of view. And I think that's the biggest role that culture and context play in this, is just the fact that he's intrigued by the culture, which really makes us feel like we're not some foreign people invading. It's like we're right beside him. We're also intrigued by the culture, and that really serves to establish the connection between us and the narrative voice.
Yeah, he helps us sort of get interested, doesn't he?
Yeah.
For him, what is sort of essential for him regarding culture? Why is he there?
Well, for him, it's to discover his family, and I think the best way to discover your family is to trace your lineage, and what better place to do it is your homeland. And just the fact that there's a lot of culture already present in Ceylon, like culture from colonizers, culture from the native people there. I think this really opens up a broad window for Ondaatje, and it really shows him, okay, this is one thing over here. This is the colonizers. This is the effect that they had. Now this is the the native the native culture here, such as there was a lizard, I think it was called the Thalagoya or something, right? So there's that sort of traditional culture there where they would eat that the tongue of that lizard, etc. And he was very intrigued by that idea. He found it very interesting, and he chose to include it in his memoir. So I think culture plays a big role for him. And then on the other hand, he looks at the effect that the colonizers had. They introduced this 6-hour-long card game to the Ceylonese people to distract them while they were ransacking their country pretty much. So I think just the fact that he chooses to include both of those things, it's like he's trying to preserve the culture of Ceylon by including all the culture that it has, not just its traditional culture.
Thank you. For him, he also sort of focuses on sort of the individuals, the characters, as it were. Is there any character in the work, person other than the writer, whose presence you found to be most memorable?
I think his father, Mervyn Ondaatje, because as we progress through the book becomes not more about discovering his family and himself, but just more about discovering his father, because he finds out stuff about his family members. He finds out stuff about his grandmother Lala. He finds out stuff about his mother Doris. But the one person that he can't truly come to realize is his father, and this fact is further amplified. I mean, there's a chapter towards the end. It's called Thanikoma, which means loneliness in the Ceylonese language, right? And in this chapter, it's very interesting because he goes from a third-person sort of narrative voice. He's describing his father, like, Mervyn was sitting over there. He was observing the pages, the ants carrying the pages away, and then he switches over to a first-person voice. He speaks from Mervyn's perspective. He's like, I had the bottle to my mouth. I was sitting there watching the pages being taken away. I think that, so he's really trying to sort of develop that pathos that we should feel for Mervyn, that he feels for Mervyn, the fact that he can't, come to realize his identity, and he really uses that for us. And another thing is, he's very skeptical when he's talking about Mervyn. He even openly admits that, whatever I'm saying, this might not be the case, but that's the thing. Right, truth is just fiction that's accepted by everybody, and the fact that I can put this in the book, it makes it so everybody accepts it. So that becomes the truth. So I think that's the role that he that's what makes Mervyn very interesting for me.
So thanks for that. Along those lines, what role does anecdote then play in the the discovery or the attempt at discovery?
I think anecdotes play a major role in this book. Like, firstly, since this is I wouldn't really call it a memoir. I'd call it a combination of a memoir, an autobiography, and a biography. But just anecdotes in general, they play a major role. For example, like Michael has a lot of encounters with foreign ideas, foreign concepts, right? And we have to really analyze the things that he chooses to include and the things he chooses to throw away. The fact that for example, there was a character named Francis de Serran, right? And he died, and Mervyn didn't tell us how he died. I mean, he mentioned he died of alcoholism. He didn't tell us where he died. He told us that he died holding a fish in his hand. I think that really adds to the anecdotal nature of this thing, because when we experience a memory, the things that we sort of remember from it might be things that are of negligible significance to others. So just the fact that he includes these almost irrelevant details really adds to the feeling that this is an anecdote. We're getting a window into somebody else's life, and that's what really serves to the anecdotes. They really serve to establish that personal connection with the author. That we're being let a window into his life, and he's choosing to include these sort of irrelevant small details. And I think that's the role of anecdotes.
So therefore, then, do you think that, or do you have any reservations about the writer's responses or attitudes?
I think that
places or ideas?
I think that just the fact that the anecdotal nature of this book, I think it has a limiting factor, being that he might not want to expose everything to us, right? For example, I'd say the chapter called Photograph, right? He sees a photograph of his mother and father sitting there being happy. That's I think it's the shortest chapter of the book. So why would something that's of paramount significance to him be so short? And I think that in a sense he's being selfish. He wants to keep that memory with him. He doesn't want to share it with anybody else. But I mean, I guess that is his right, because he's pretty much letting us have a window into his life, and he chooses to conserve the little things that might have paramount significance just to himself. He doesn't want to share it with the world, because he wants that memory to live on within him, not to share it with everybody. So
well, that's fair enough then. So even though he's wanting to sort of save some things for his own personal use, how does he therefore, though, establish sort of some of the humanistic issues that might make an audience feel connected and part of the journey?
I think the biggest humanistic issue that he explores in this is just the effect of colonization on Ceylon, because obviously, Ceylon, right at the beginning, right, he describes it as a place like no other. I remember there was a chapter at the start of the novel where he was standing in a room with his friend in Toronto, and he was looking at the different, maps and how they portrayed, the country of Ceylon, and he described it as, none of these, representations of Ceylon on the map even come close to what it actually is. It's like, I think he mentioned it as something like the white man has painted it how he sees it, right? And I think that just the fact that he makes all these references to colonization and the way that he does it is very interesting, because he never outright just says, colonization is bad, right? He always leaves open that interpretation for us. Like, we try to figure out, what is he exactly trying to say about colonization, because there's some points, where he just integrates poetry and lets that do the narrating for him. So he integrates these, like, I think it was like this, in the first chapter, there were like 3 or 4 poems just back to back, just integrated into the narrative that were about colonization, and they had, some very negative, opinions about Ceylon, such as, I think it was it was a man who had the last name Wolf. I think it was Lawrence Wolf or something along those lines. But he made the reference that all jungles are evil, and obviously that leaves open the interpretation, but it's very clear that he has a negative intention there. But then we flip the page, and literally on the other page, there is a quote by another man saying something about Ceylon being this rich, place with all these mineral resources and spices, etc. So I think the way that he portrays colonization, that humanistic ideal, it's very interesting, because he leaves open that interpretation for us, and he provides us both sides of the page, not just the one that he wants to include.
Thank you. In your opinion, does the memoir reach a satisfying conclusion?
Yeah, I think it reaches a very satisfying conclusion, because, well, for one, the way that he uses that sort of postmodern style, he maintains a skeptical, very skeptical approach towards the entire novel. Even at the end, he mentions that in Ceylon, one well-told lie is worth 1,000 truths. So I think that's the biggest reference to postmodernism there. He recognizes that that what he's writing in the book might not be what actually happened, but this is what's important to him, right? And this is what he wants to tell us. And the thing with postmodernism is it also leaves open the interpretation for us, so we can fill in the gaps. We can reach our satisfying conclusion, and he can reach his satisfying conclusion that he reached by writing that book. So I think it reaches a very satisfying conclusion.
Thank you, Kazim.